Okay friends, welcome back. We are now into 29th module of AI. We will be discussing about conceptual dependency. You have already seen in semantic net that we can represent the natural language statements using some links and some nodes. The conceptual dependency is little better way of doing that, where we have lot of restriction on the type of links that we can have, type of nodes that we can have, and how they can relate to each other, making it a very strong knowledge representation technique. What do I mean by strong is that it provides very clear meaning to a representation. It is about having some predefined primitives and predefined links to be used for representing general English statements and any other language statements. One of the great things about CD is that it becomes language independent once you convert the statement into CD. It can also be used as interlingua actually. So, if you convert an English statement into a CD form, that CD form can be converted to any other language. The other important thing about CD is that it captures the meaning of a statement rather than just showing links about the words that those are used in the statement, rather than providing that superficial understanding of what the statement is about. It talks about the meaning the statement carries, and we will be looking at that particular part in this particular module. CD is another method of knowledge representation, like semantic net and other methods that we have seen so far. The meaning of the statement appears in the representation. And interestingly, because meaning is represented, it becomes very easy for somebody to infer from it something which otherwise is just not possible. We will again stress this thing once we talk about how anything is represented in CD. It is very strict form actually. You can't have any kind of link that you want, you can't have any type of node, and again allowed links and allowed nodes are always fixed. So, that is something which is different in CD. And interestingly, because of that, different statements with the same meaning will have same representation in conceptual dependence. That is one of the strengths of CD. And there are some specific how it is done actually. So, there are some specific primitives, we will be looking at them, basic building blocks, and those around those building blocks the structures are generated, and those structures are used to represent simplest things about the world. And whenever you encounter a statement which probably contains many simple things about the world, those things are collected together, represented as a collection in conceptual dependency. And in fact, that is the great thing about, so small, there are 13 total primitives, 11 plus then one was added later and one more. Those primitives are simple primitives, and any language, any statement can be represented using that statement. It is kind of a generalized representation of a statement, and it is quite similar to, if you have some idea about how Unix works or Linux works, it has some small set of system calls 63, and any command that you type actually is converted to some form, some combination of those system calls to get the job done. Similarly, the statement here is converted to some basic collection of some basic primitives. Okay. So, we will be talking about them. Okay. We begin with something called conceptual roles. Now, every entity involved in a statement has some role to play, and this role is represented by this conceptual role that we talk about. For example, pick up a word called love. Now, that love can appear in many ways. A statement, for example, Ram loves Sita, or Ram found Sita loving, or something like that. So, word love is used in many forms, but basically the meaning out of this is that Ram loves Sita is the essence of this statement, and that is basically represented. So, multiple statements having Ram loves Sita, Ram found Sita loving, and so on and so forth can be represented using a single statement. The essence is picked up and used. In fact, the conceptual roles does not, and you may not find that thing in the statement sometimes, but it is derived out of that. For example, when I say that X Ram shot Shyam, for example. Now, here when you represent that in CD, it represents it in a way that Ram used some weapon, we shot a bullet, which enters into Shyam's body. So, this thing is actually represented. So, the very statement does not contain anything about bullet or gun or something, but the representation contains them. So, these are the things which is very important in CD, and it derives, in fact, for that what you are supposed to do is to derive meaning out of that statement. Okay. Whenever a statement is presented, CD representation, the first job to convert that into CD representation is to derive meaning out of that statement, and once the meaning is derived, that thing, okay, is represented. There are few statements like I just talked about, Ram is in love with Sita, Ram loves Sita, Ram found Sita loving, and these all statements will have same representation, and many times CD attempts to get more information out of that statement. For example, one typical example I could quote from Mahabharata is Purochan endangered Pandavas. Now, this is a statement that you probably encounter reading. Okay. Now, here the meaning that CD gets out of this is that Purochan tries to do something which reduces Pandava's health, and that actually is very important representation, because it involves something which is a question mark. So, what Purochan is trying to do, you cannot determine that from this particular statement, but if you have read other statements, if you can relate this statement with previous statements, you probably will learn that there is something which Purochan is going to do, which going to burn that Laksha Gruha. So, that kind of meaning can be derived out of a statement, which was not possible using any other method before. And this may be, in fact, if the proper statements are there before this particular statement is invoked, probably the CD representation will be such that Pandava, the Purochan tried to burn Laksha Gruha to make sure Pandava's health becomes -10. Now, you may be surprised, if somebody is done, then it is called health equal to -10 in CD. Now, this is something very similar to some which we have seen in the beginning when we discussed about static evaluation function. So, the values of there are many variables used, and those values are between -10 to 10. 10 is the maximum and -10 is the minimum value. So, when you say health equal to -10, the person is dead. So, that is kind of, or health equal to 5, then he is happy, health equal to 10, then is ecstatic. Okay, kind of representation that is possible using CD. You may be surprised that what is it, like when you represent health equal to -10 and 10, it does not really represent the mental state of a person. And whenever, in fact, when you represent concept like love, the same thing probably would happen. You may say that there is something happened which makes the mental state equal to 10 or something. Now, this is not love. You can understand that you are not representing love, but that is not the problem of CD. Please understand, that is the problem of language. We do not have something which can really represent love. We, like in the earlier case, we have looked at predicate logic representation when we define brother as brother XY, where both the parents of X and Y are same. Now, that is fine, it is a mechanical definition of a brother, but can you define brother that way? You cannot. Okay. So, that essence is not captured by the language, it is not the limitation of CD. The CD is actually derived from that language, so it lacks that. So, if you feel that it is not very good about CD, is actually the problem with the language and not CD. Okay, let us start talking about the abstract, the first primitive, okay, the PTRANS, abstract transfer. Actually, it talks about mental control, actually the control or ownership or position transfer. For example, when one example that is given in the handout says Sachin gave his bat to Sarfaraz. Now, that is an example of the transfer of ownership. Okay, such things are represented using the primitive called PTRANS. Okay, and here the every action, this is PTRANS represents an action, transformation of ownership, and it has an actor. The actor is the person who initiates that process. For example, when I say that Sachin gave his bat to Sarfaraz, Sachin is an actor. But if you say that Sarfaraz received a bat from Sachin, Sarfaraz is an actor. So, whoever initiates the process, whoever is the actor, is associated with this particular association, this particular the primitive. Okay. For example, in fact, multiple verbs can be represented using the same primitive. For example, give, Sarfaraz, Sachin gave his bat to Sarfaraz will have PTRANS. Okay, as a primitive. Sachin gifted a bat to Sarfaraz also will have that. Similarly, Sarfaraz took a bat from Sachin will also have the same thing, because it's basically essentially the same thing. That's the idea of CD. So, multiple statements with same meaning or similar meaning or same shade of meaning are derived into single similar representation. The next one is called PTRANS or physical transformation, unlike abstract one which was there before. Okay. For example, throw is a verb. When you say throw, what does that mean? Whatever you are throwing is physically transferred. For example, when I say that I am throwing a stone, so throw, the word actually indicates that the stone is being PTRANS to some other location. Or when I say I run or Milkha Singh ran, what does that mean? Milkha Singh PTRANS himself to some other location, or I PTRANS myself to some other location. So, PTRANS talks about changing of location. There are a lot of others. For example, run. That's what fly is also an example of, or drive is an example of pre-transing, changing location. But there are other things associated. These verbs are a little more complex. So, there are more than one thing involved. For example, throw also involves moving of body part. Okay. So, that involves the other primitive which we talk about later called moving a body part. Similarly, fly also involves something else happening. Fly means you took a plane to reach to that place. So, that is the additional information. So, when you talk about representing fly, you have few other things rather than additional in addition to PTRANS. Similarly, when you talk about run, you are transferring your own self. Throw, you have move, or catch. Okay, you are the recipient of that PTRANS movement. Okay. So, same like a trans, there is a transformation, but here as a physical one, the location is changed. In fact, throw also involves something called PROPEL. Okay. You apply physical force to something. So, so, throw is little more complex. Point is, there is a verb, if there is a verb which indicates physical transformation of any object, you will have to have PTRANS into that representation. The next one is PROPEL. PROPEL means applying physical force to the object. Okay. So, when you are throwing or when you are kicking something or doing something where you apply physical force, you are talking about PROPEL. An example, when I am pushing something, I am propelling, but the direction is opposite to me. When I am pulling, I am again propelling, but the direction is different. You can see that, and this is something which I was constantly trying to talk about since the beginning, that these are primitives, very simple forms of representation, which can actually represent many verbs together. Okay. So, all these push and pull and throw and kick, all of them can be represented using this PROPEL. Okay. And throw and kick, as I have talked about, also involves moving a body part. The other one is called MTRANS, mental transformation, something where the mind is involved, the transfer about something where the mind is involved. Now, MTRANS is quite important here, because for example, a verb called reading is what? Reading is about transforming the MTRANS information from, for example, I am reading a newspaper. So, from that newspaper it is going into my mind, and when you talk about mind, Shank who developed this and his team, the team members who developed this, use three different parts of brain. One is long term memory, which retains everything that is remembered, a short term memory, and a conscious processor, that something which processes the information. So, when I am reading, basically it MTRANSing information from that newspaper to CP, and once CP reads it, it might use short term memory for processing it and then transfers that thing to long term memory. So, this is what is represented. The word, whenever the word like read or listen, for example, or hear or whatever of that type, okay, when mental information is being transferred, MTRANS is used, and we will see some examples about how to use this form, but this is a basic primitive thing that you must understand. Okay. And when you talk about MTRANS, information comes from various sources. For example, when you see, the information is coming from eyes. When you hear, the information is coming from ears. When you touch and feel, the information coming from the other senses, and so on and so forth. So, the various senses, the information is coming in and it is being sent to CP. Okay. So, usually the MTRANS is used where such things are happening. The mental information is being transmitted. Okay. For example, let us take a verb called remember. What is happening in remember? Remembering basically converts something or transfers something which is there in CP into long term memory or short term memory. if it is, you are not going to remember it for a long period. Forget is exactly opposite to it, something which was part of the long term memory is gone out. Hear, tell, okay, and so on and so forth. I have talked about some verbs myself, and you can find a few more. An interesting, in fact, you if you have read about something called Felder-Silverman model, if you are a teacher, probably you have heard about that Felder-Silverman model and Meyer-Briggs model, that was little older. It defines learners of two different types. One type of learners are sensors who learn from outside, and the other type of learners are intuitors. They learn from within, they conceive things, they process things, they think over some whatever is presented and learn from them. They are called intuitors. The first type of learners are called sensors. When you do something in your mind, conceive an idea or build something within your mind, it is called MBUILD. That is represented by a primitive called MBUILD. Okay, again is mental and building something. So, when you conceive an idea, the verb conceive can be represented using MBUILD. Imagine can be represented using MBUILD. Consider, or even answer. Answer is what? Answer is I am building something in a response to a question, and you again after that, once that is done, you also use MTRANS from that mind to the mouth. Okay. So, that is done. In fact, answer is represented like that. Okay. One more primitive is called ingest, taking something from outside. For example, when you eat something, you are taking a solid object from outside, ingesting it, or drinking something which is liquid, which you are taking in. Okay. Breath is again taking air in. Okay. Smoke is ingesting the smoke inside the lungs. Okay. The next one is called grasp, which has very clear meaning. So, you do not need to worry more about grasp. Grasp is picking up something, holding it. So, if you use verb like pick up, hold, and all that, if you want to represent them using CD, you will use grasp as the primitive. One more is called attend. Now, when you focus your sensing organ to something, for example, when I am reading, I am focusing my eyes on newspaper, or when I am listening, I am focusing my ear on the other party's words and whatever. So, in all these cases, for example, I am viewing a cricket match. So, I am attending my eyes to the match. Okay. So, attend is attaching your sensing organ or attending your sensing organ to something which is coming from outside. The other one is called expel, forcefully throw out something. For example, when I am crying, the tears expel out of my eyes. And one more called speak, generate a sound. Okay. So, that these are all examples of primitives. In fact, Schenck added plan later, a few other, in fact, there are many papers of Schenck, and if you read about them, lot of other information is possibly available. I have collected all of them from collected them from the papers. So, you better you may read those papers yourself. I have not talked about plan and others in this thing. I have talked about the primitives which are most commonly used and represented, but you can see that this is one view, and please understand that this is Schenck's view. He thought of these primitives. If you start thinking like this from the ground level, you probably come out with very different, maybe exclusively different from this particular set, and still be able to represent your statement. So, it is not that this is the primitive, these are the primitives, or this is the list. More importantly, we must understand that this is an idea, how to represent a language, statement of a language using simple primitives. Okay. So, you may choose your own set if you wish to, it is absolutely right, nothing bad about, nothing wrong about that. Okay. So, I do not want to say that this is the list. My point is this: You may add, you may remove, okay. You may have your own completely your own set of primitives, you can still solve the problem, but this is an excellent solution. So, that is why we are learning about this. Okay. So, we have a table which actually summarizes all the primitives and their work. Now, the second thing that we will have to, once we have looked at those primitives which can represent actions or verbs into those primitives, the other one are the links. Those links are known as dependencies, and very rightly so, because it talks about how one object is dependent on the other one. For example, there are actors. So, Sachin gave his bat to Sarfaraz, then Sachin is an actor, and the A-trans is the primitive. Now, that Sachin and A-trans have some relation. That relation is to be like written, and that is called dependency. So, in fact, in this case Sachin and A-trans dependent on each other, it is two-way dependency. A bat and this process of transformation, bat depends on this thing actually. So, that dependency is one way. So, these are called dependencies and dependencies are part of CD. Though after primitives, the next thing is CD. The actors can be of two different types. For example, animate objects like Sachin, and sometimes even natural forces can also be used in CD as the actors. Okay. Action is described by this primitive, and many times it is called ACT or action. Dependencies also are possible to be modified using some small indicators. One is called LOC or location, which talks about where this thing happened. For example, Milkha Singh ran is Milkha Singh and PTRANS, and the object is himself. Now, once you say that Milkha Singh ran, it is done, but when you say Milkha Singh ran in Pakistan, that additional information is location. So, that additional Pakistan will have a link, and that link will indicate LOC. That means that this link describes the location where this particular action has happened. Okay. Sometimes you want to specify the time. For example, Milkha Singh ran yesterday, then that arrow will have that information. So, that is sometimes called T. T represent time. And there are some action aiders. For example, when you say Milkha Singh ran yesterday, that yesterday is called action aider. So, and there is something called picture aiders, which talks about the attributes of the object. For example, Sachin is clever. That clever is an attribute of Sachin. So, that is represented as picture aiders in CD. We will see the examples of all of them soon, but these are the basic building blocks of CD, and they are called conceptual categories. This PP, picture producer, PA, picture aiders, and act and location and time and all that, that together are called conceptual categories. Conceptual roles are also very important. Single conceptual entity represents the event. Okay. For example, when I say Milkha Singh PTRANS is called a single conceptualization. When we talked about predicate logic, okay, we used a structure and we call that thing a predicate. Here we call that thing as a conceptualization, and in fact, a single statement might require multiple conceptualizations. As I said, a single conceptualization talk about a very simple, involves a single primitive. So, when I say I am throwing a stone, actually that involves more than one primitives. For example, one is pre-trans, because the location of stone is changing. I am using a body part, so move is also involved. Okay. So, kind of. Okay. So, that, and I am also using a physical force. So, PROPEL is also involved. So, there are three different conceptualizations acting together to represent a given statement. Okay. So, those are, and what was the role of an action? There is an action, there is an actor, there is an object, and so on and so forth. So, these are all conceptual roles, and I have already talked about them. There are a few other things. For example, one is called recipient case relationship. When the ownership is transferred, for example, I gave the example like Sachin gave his bat to Sarfaraz. the ownership is transferred from Sachin to Sarfaraz. So, from and to, this relationship is represented by a recipient case relationship. Sometimes even direction is to be mentioned. So, for example, Sachin flew to Los Angeles to play a game. So, here again is called direction. It's Sachin is going from somewhere, we do not know where, we have just, the statement does not have the information that from where Sachin has started, but we know that where Sachin is landed, Los Angeles. So, that is called the direction relationship. Sometimes you say, you find a little better statement like Sachin flew to Los Angeles from Mumbai. So, you know the direction from Mumbai to Los Angeles and so on and so forth. And there is one more thing, there is something called state, and I have talked about that state a little earlier. When you say that health equal to minus 10, you are talking about state of a variable, state of something which is between minus 10 to 10. So, that also is a very important role of a concept in CD. Okay. There is something called conceptual tense which comes next. Conceptual, there are single letter indicators, okay, conceptual tenses. For example, slash indicates negation, P indicates past tense, question mark indicates something which the information is not available, a kind of a placeholder. Later on you might encounter, for example, you encounter a statement like Sachin went to LA, and then you probably will have a statement coming next, Sachin bought a necklace for his wife in Mumbai 2 days before. Now, once you have that information, you can understand that you probably have flown from Mumbai to LA. So, that Mumbai, the earlier representation, the starting point is a question mark, and when the next statement is encountered, the starting point becomes Mumbai. So, that is something which a CD can do, in fact, and that question mark you can see is an example of a conceptual tense. There is, for example, if you encounter a statement, if you drive rash, there is more chances of meeting with an accident. Now, such kind of if else is possible using something called C, and we will see examples of all of them. C is conditional, C indicates that the relationship is conditional, if this happens that will happen, if else kind of, if then kind of a relationship. It is also possible to indicate that there is a transition, there is something which is happening and here it gets concluded. Okay. So, that also is indicated by a conceptual tense called TF P. Okay. So, transition finished and at TS transition starting, commencement and conclusion both are possible. Okay. So, conceptual tenses, past is P, future is F, negation is S, start of a transition is TS and so on and so forth, and there is a table in the handout which describes this. When there is nothing, it assumes that it is the present tense. Okay. So, nothing, then it is present tense. Okay. And we have few examples. I watched a match. What does that mean? MTRANS match, and then the information is coming from is and going to my CP. Okay. So, that is represented in the handout. You can see that there is a double arrow between I and MTRANS, which indicates double dependency. Now, why have I used double arrows? Because it is something I found that thing somewhere in Shank's paper, he used that, and most of the other books also and other representations where I have seen, they are like that. Sometimes there is some difference. Okay. So, sometimes I have seen 3 line arrows and all that, but that does not make much of a difference to us, because we want to differentiate between this type of arrows with other arrows. As long as we are able to uniquely identify different type of arrows, we do not need to have an issue. Okay. You can see P indicating past tense. Okay. Then you have an object. What is the object for MTRANS? Match. Okay. And then there is a recipient case relationship where I is, it's coming from eyes, the information is coming from eyes and going to CP. When I am watching a match, that information is going inside my mind. So, that is what is done. The other example is Raman is dead. Raman is dead means his health is reduced to minus 10. What was it earlier? Maybe greater than minus 10. Okay. So, that is the next statement you can see, which is is a 3-prong structure which represents the state change. Raman's health is now -10. Okay, the next one is Sachin gave his bat to Sarfaraz. I will not talk about this, I have already discussed this. Okay. And this is a small thing contribute to large structure, that is the great thing about CD. With that, we would like to end this particular module. What we have seen in this particular module, we have seen the basic building structure of conceptual dependency. We looked at different primitives, we looked at conceptual roles, tenses, and how a statement can be represented using CD. And the next module we will be looking at how this particular simpler forms can be combined into representing complex statements. Okay, we will be looking at the rules which are used to represent different shades, different types of statements. With that, we will conclude. Thank you.